There is a kind of smallness that has nothing to do with your body. You can be tall, your voice can carry across a room, and still, somewhere inside, you flinch before you sit down, apologize before you speak, shrink before anyone even asks you to. This isn't shyness. It isn't humility. It's something older, quieter, learned long before you had words for it. Today, we trace it back to where it began. Somewhere in your early years, you learned to read a room before you learned to read a book. You knew before anyone told you outright which version of you was welcome and which version made the air feel tight. Maybe it was a parent's exhaustion. Maybe it was a sibling who needed more, or a household where love had to be earned in quiet, careful ways. So you adjusted. You became smaller, easier, more convenient. You became the child who didn't ask for much, because asking felt like a risk you couldn't afford. Have you ever noticed how some children are praised simply for existing, for laughing too loud, for wanting too much, for taking the biggest piece of cake without a second thought? And have you noticed how others are praised only for disappearing well? If you were the second kind, you didn't choose that role. It was handed to you gently, almost lovingly, by people who didn't know they were doing it. You were told you were so good, so easy, no trouble at all. And you believed, the way children believe everything, that this was who you were. But what if that wasn't who you were at all? What if it was simply who you had to become to stay safe? Children don't interpret love and safety with logic. They interpret it with their nervous system. And your nervous system, somewhere along the way, drew a quiet conclusion. Asterisk taking up space is dangerous. Not in those words, of course. It was felt long before it was understood, in the held breath before you spoke, in the way you learned to make yourself agreeable, in the strange guilt that crept in whenever you simply enjoyed something fully, without apology. This is erosion, not a single storm, but years of small waves wearing down the same shoreline, until the land simply assumes its new, smaller shape. You stopped noticing the wearing away because it never stopped. It became the baseline. It became asterisk normal. You may have felt this in moments when you ordered the cheaper meal so you wouldn't be a burden. When you laughed a little quieter so no one would think you were too much. When you said, "I'm fine," while something inside you was quietly drowning because your needs felt like an inconvenience to a world that already seemed full. The body keeps a record even when the mind forgets. And somewhere in your shoulders, your stomach, the way you hold your breath in rooms full of people, your body has been keeping the score of every time you made yourself smaller to be loved. What does it cost to live a life trying not to be noticed? There's often a single moment, small, almost forgettable, that cracks something open. Maybe it was watching someone else take up space without guilt, laughing loudly in a quiet restaurant, asking for what they wanted without flinching, simply being without earning it first. And maybe, instead of admiration, what you felt was a strange, aching grief. Because in that moment, you saw the mirror clearly for the first time. You saw that you had been living as a guest in your own life, careful with the furniture, quiet on the stairs, always ready to leave at a moment's notice, even though this life was supposed to be yours. You may have asked yourself, when did I start believing I needed permission to exist fully? When did wanting things start to feel like a debt I had to repay? This is the turning point, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet unraveling of a story you didn't write, but had been living inside for years. The shadow that followed you, shaping your decisions, your relationships, your silence, it finally had a name. And once something has a name, it can no longer hide in the dark the way it used to. What does it feel like to finally recognize the shape of something that has followed you your entire life? Healing rarely looks like triumph. More often, it looks like grief, mourning the years you spent apologizing for your own presence, the relationships you shrank inside of, the dreams you didn't reach for because reaching felt too loud, too greedy, too asterisk much. You are allowed to grieve that. The child who learned to disappear deserves to be mourned, not scolded for surviving the only way they knew how. But alongside the grief, something else begins to surface: relief. The strange, almost unfamiliar lightness of realizing the weight was never truly yours to carry. You didn't fail to take up space because something was wrong with you. You learned not to because somewhere once it kept you safe. And now you get to ask a different question, not how do I stay small enough to be loved, but what does it feel like to simply exist without earning it? You don't need to announce your worth to a room. You don't need to perform smallness to be welcome. The space you've been afraid to take was never someone else's to give you. It was always yours, simply by being here. Who might you become if you stopped asking permission to exist? Maybe you won't fill the room tomorrow. Maybe the old instinct to shrink will still visit you, quiet and familiar, in moments you least expect. That's all right. Healing isn't the absence of the old pattern, it's noticing it gently and choosing just a little more each time to stay, to breathe a little deeper, to let yourself be fully, unapologetically here. You were never too much. You were only ever told that you were.